Conversations with Indie Authors.
Okay, welcome to the show, Tim Kelly.
Hello, thank you.
Can you tell our listeners a little bit about your journey as an author and the inspiration behind your books, especially The Hidden History of Humanity and The Math Wizard?
I actually knew I wanted to become a writer ever since I was a little kid. It's something I knew from pretty much first grade on. I was a spelling champion, speech champion, debate champion, won several writing awards that continued into high school. So it was something I always knew that I wanted to do. Unfortunately, a lot of challenges faced me when I was about 20 years old. I had been tracking different authors that I liked. One of my favorites was a best-selling fantasy and science fiction author named Piers Anthony. And in the back of his books, he had what he called author's notes. And these were revelations about what was going on inside the publishing industry. For me, that was a really big deal because it was a chance for me to understand what was going on. And I met an older gentleman who started trying to introduce me to how you would actually go about the business side of writing. And he told me, well, what you'll need to do is go to a library, go to the reference section, and you'll find these two books. And one's called Writer's Market, the other's called Literary Marketplace. And then I learned about what publishing houses were looking for and how to approach them. For people who are not familiar, there are some places that only want you to approach them if you have an agent. There are other places that only want you to supply a query letter because they don't have time to read full books. But in any case, I knew what I was determined to do. And when I was reading one of Piers Anthony's author's notes, a little bombshell was dropped into my life. He was basically talking about his experiences in being accepted for publication. And what he talked about was that whenever he tried to put meaning into his writing, the editors were trying to slash it out. They basically wanted to keep the human mind in the gutter, everything to be as sensationalistic as possible. And that was super frustrating for me. And I realized that I had spent more than a decade preparing to do forms of writing that, if what Piers said was true, were going to be completely rejected. They would never allow this to be published. It was very harsh for me to face that reality. It was actually quite devastating. But nevertheless, I stuck on my path and said, well, maybe that will happen, maybe it won't. But that actually did happen. So it was very brutal. My writing was praised. People who had read the stories loved what I wrote, but the publishing houses really wanted nothing to do with them. So I became an independent author and eventually formed my own publishing houses. And that's how I got to writing any number of books. There have been actually more than 20, but some of the most recent ones do include Hidden History of Humanity and The Math Wizard. And I will pause there for a moment.
So your work explores Atlantis and the path to enlightenment. What kind of insights can readers expect from your books?
Some of the most profound, I think. And right now, I feel that these insights are probably more needed than they have ever been. When you go back to ancient times, I feel we have been misled about the past. Many people have heard about Atlantis. They hear that it's just a story that came originally from one source, Plato. This is not at all true. The story of Plato has been backed up by several other people, including famous ancient historians like Diodorus of Sicily. There was a gentleman named Crantor who went to Egypt and found the story of Atlantis carved on pillars just like Plato said it was. And I have uncovered tons of evidence of an actual Atlantis, how it was founded, and of the advanced civilization that spawned it. Now, of course, when people are familiar with the Greek gods, they hear the idea of gods, and then they are not quite sure what to make of that. What exactly is he talking about, gods? What my research shows is that these were beings from another world who had came here, and as Plato says in his history, one of those beings from another world named Poseidon mated with a mortal woman named Cleito. Now, I have uncovered evidence that our species, Homo sapiens, was actually engineered by positive beings from the stars that stood about 12 feet tall with blonde or gold hair and blue eyes. And they created this line of demigods, which is basically described by Plato. But this is an actual, verifiable historical story. We can talk about the Atlantean capital that once existed in a place called Poseidonis. This is in the Bermuda Triangle. Many people have probably heard tales of strange events that take place in the Bermuda Triangle. I believe that's tied into the sunken capital Poseidonis that was once there. To the east was another major city called Tritonus, and that was ruled over by one of the sets of twins. There were 5 sets of twins in a demigod line. And in Hidden History of Humanity, I talk about what Atlantis was like, how the Great Pyramid in Egypt is actually part of a Great Pyramid network, of which there was one once originally in the capital of Atlantis. This is actually backed up mathematically in the following way. If you go to a map of planet Earth and imagine a cube being inserted into the shape of the spherical planet, it will touch the planet exactly where the Great Pyramid in Egypt is. If you go exactly 90 degrees west, you will hit the Bermuda Triangle, where the capital of Atlantis once was. So there did used to exist this Great Pyramid network, and the pyramid in Egypt is part of this Atlantean legacy. Now, what they offered the demigods was a path to enlightenment, and had they chosen that path to enlightenment, then everything in history that we know, all the suffering, all the wars, it could have all been avoided. So what I do in Hidden History is take you through everything in Atlantis that I've uncovered, work you from there up to the advent of Sumer, which was a very dark civilization. And Sumer spread a path of darkness around the world, which is impacting us to this day. It does not need to. We have answers, we have solutions. And in the book, The Math Wizard, what I did was reverse engineer the path to enlightenment that was offered in Atlantis. It's a fictional novel, but the math and the science in it are real. And I can explain how I did the reverse engineering, but it actually does offer us this chance to have positive answers now, today, that we can use to make ourselves healthy and free and independent.
Well, what are they?
Okay, so a little bit of what has been uncovered. So there was an author by the name of Tony Bushby, and he wrote a series of books, including The Bible Fraud, The Secret in the Bible, and several other books. The book that is of interest here is the book called The Secret in the Bible. Now, his research was very impressive, and he certainly had access to some esoteric sources, to be sure. But what he talks about is the mystery schools that existed in ancient Egypt. Now, these are very well known to ancient historians, and many of the most famous figures of history, including Plato himself, were initiates and graduates of this mystery school. For example, when many people think that some of these nations had independent, spontaneous histories, clearly they did not. Think of the Roman Empire for a second. Most people are familiar with the Roman Empire and what a great role it played in history. How many people are familiar with the following fact? The very first emperor in the Roman Empire was an initiate into the mystery school, and he was initiated in the mystery school in Egypt. So this mystery school in Egypt had a 7-degree program. Bushby uncovered what those degrees were. Now, what I uncovered was that there was a war that was fought, a war lost to history. I may be the first historian to actually mention it. This war was fought between the overlords of Sumer and the people who were administering the Giza Plateau where the Great Pyramid was, along with many other spectacular buildings and temples. And they were fighting the legacy forces of Atlantis left at that site in Giza. After the war, the forces administering Egypt lost, and the Sumerian overlords took over. They pestered the locals to explain what was being taught in the mystery school. And then once they learned what was being taught, I believe they gutted it and they stripped out the most essential elements. So yes, you could have initiates from Greece, from Rome, from other areas going in and going through the program, but at that point it was corrupted. So what I did is went back and reformed it back to its original form. Now, how did I do that? I used Bushby's work as a reference, and then I looked at the greatest minds of all time and everything that they had uncovered, and I re-pieced together what a 7-degree program would be to help one understand a fully functioning Great Pyramid. So let me pause there for a second. The Great Pyramid, most people have maybe heard the classic theory that it's a tomb. That idea is completely ridiculous. It's been overturned by countless scholars, one of the greatest of which was Christopher Dunn, a no-nonsense machinist who wrote a book called The Giza Power Plant. So if you follow through the premises developed by Christopher Dunn, you will come to the following conclusion. At its lowest level, the Great Pyramid was a communication device, and it could communicate wirelessly like our technology today, but on a far grander scale. Beyond that, it had a power function, so it could actually broadcast power. Now, in recent times, there was a great genius, Nikola Tesla, who was trying to broadcast free power to the world. My research shows that he was actually it is said that he visited the great psychic Edgar Cayce, who told him he was a reincarnated Atlantean. I think that's probably accurate. And largely, he was doing a crude version of what the Great Pyramid could do, which was broadcast free power to the world. And beyond that, at an extremely advanced level, was a defensive capability where a Great Pyramid could use something called interferometry, select a target, and overload it with so much energy that the target would explode. So in the 7-degree program that I present in the Math Wizard, the 7 degrees are pretty much as follows. Degree number 1, math and materials. Degree 2, geometry and architecture. Degree 3, logic and flows. Degree 4, vibration and chemistry. Degree 5, spectroscopy and astronomy. Degree 6, music and being. And degree 7, final revelation.
Wow, really intense topic. That's you brought in so many different people. Whew. So is all of this gone over in your book?
It is indeed. In the Hidden History of Humanity, I go over the story of one group of positive beings who were trying to encourage us to be our best. There was a neutral group, a very strange group. They're definitely not of this world. They were a group I call the Cyanians. They were blue-green in skin, had elongated heads, were amphibious, and strangely enough, hermaphrodites. They were capable of parthenogenesis, which means giving virgin births, which is interesting to many historical religions and ideas. And then there was an extremely negative reptile group, the ones that founded Sumer. And I talk about how all of these groups have vied for control of this planet and its resources. Many have engaged in acts of genetic tampering with the species on this planet, and we are being impacted by that to this day. As a matter of fact, if you read the book, you will find that history itself appears to be coming to a head right now, because there are people who are speaking of something called the transhuman agenda. And this involves many things, including turning human beings into robots. Now, they're going to tell you that they're doing this for benevolent reasons. They always start off benevolently. And they'll use examples like quadriplegics and say, okay, well, here are people who have lost control of their limbs. If we can put computer chips in them and make them more robot-like, they'll have abilities that they wouldn't otherwise have. But if you fully buy into this, that's it. Humanity will be gone. There will be no longer be men and women. We will all be machines, and we will have a hive mind. We will lose our souls. And I hope if people go over the currents of history and hidden history, they will realize how we got into this situation and how we can get out of it. And in the Math Wizard, the fictional novel, it's based on a premise that the grandson of Poseidon chooses to go through the learning program on the path to enlightenment. So you get to see it as he sees it. And as you're going through the chapters and seeing these math ideas, there are links. So you get to see visually everything that he's talking about. You can see the flow of stress in materials like engineers see it. You can see the human energy field where there's an aura coming off of human beings as they go about their daily lives. And you can see these microscopic life forms that most people are not familiar with because this information has been suppressed from the public. There are microscopic life forms more fundamental than DNA that have been known for decades, and they've only been seen by a few scientists who had very special microscopes to see these microscopic organisms, and they influence us. And they change based on our conditions. If we're positive, they have one kind of energy. If we're negative, they have another kind of energy. Another of my books is Natural Healing Self-Empowerment. And in that nonfiction book, readers can learn about how to get rid of 99% of all pathology, get rid of allergies. I myself have not had the common cold in 15 years. There are very few people I know who can match me on that. In addition to that, the health book also offers the ability to regenerate the human body, which is something else that I'm not aware of too many people knowing how to do. In my research, there are actually several doctors who have discovered ways to regenerate the body, but most of those are extremely expensive. And mine is as simple and straightforward as it gets. Basically, human beings must do two things. They must drink water, they must eat food. If you can learn how to do those two things extremely well, you can learn how to regenerate the body. Unfortunately, right now, we do have some special challenges. Our water, our soil, our food, our air are all being comprehensively poisoned. And it's very difficult to have full regeneration, but at least you can do as much as you can And the biggest theme that I would say runs through all of my work is that paradise on earth is possible. And one of the main ways that it becomes possible is harmony with nature. And that's the main thing. I feel that every time people criticize nature, they misunderstand it. And what my research shows, and I had to learn this myself several different times when I thought nature was messing up. It was not nature that was messing up. It was me messing up in my understanding of it. And it is always beautiful. It is always elegant. It is always empowering. We will always have a home there. And especially right now, where genders are under fire, we have people telling us, we don't believe women are women. We don't believe men are men. We want to destroy the family. We want to change the air that you breathe. We want to kill off cows. We want to kill off chickens. We want to kill off all your food supplies and have you eating bugs and doing all these kinds of crazy things. Nature has solutions to all our problems, including this pandemic that's gone around the world, as the work of Dr. Brian Ardis shows. He's offering us solutions to everything based on what he's found in interacting with nature. And I will again pause there.
You have so much information. I feel like we are barely even scratching the surface, but time. Can you tell people how they can get a hold of your books and find you online?
If you go to the search engine duckduckgo.com and type in my company name, Polytope Press, it should be the first website that comes up. I invite the public to visit, browse around, let me know what you think.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing all of this. Again, I think we're only scratching the surface. So much more to share with the world, but thank you for being on today, Tim Kelly.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I very much appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us on this enlightening episode of the Zarlequan podcast. Remember to subscribe to our newsletter so you never miss a beat.